because is your superpower. Go unleash it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very special episode of Mick Unplugged. For the first time, we're live on location with two friends of mine that are dear to my heart, Chad and Alicia.
Thank you.
You know, on Mick Unplugged, we talk about going deeper than your why and being fueled by your because. And today we're going to talk about a very important cause, fighting a very dynamic and important disease, MPS I. Chad and Alicia, talk to me about this disease, and then let's talk about how you became a fighter for the awareness of this disease.
So MPS I is a genetic disease. It's classified as a lysosomal storage disorder. So in easy to understand terms, our son was born with this. He was born missing an enzyme that breaks down cellular waste. So it affects his entire body. The way that we explained it to our 7-year-old daughter at the time was that think of your whole body as a house. Every week, the garbage man comes to pick up the trash. If he didn't, it would just accumulate throughout your house and you would become essentially a hoarder. That's what's happening in his body. His body is not able to break down cellular waste because he is missing an essential enzyme. So instead of being able to recycle it throughout his body and use it, it's accumulating on his bones, his skin, tissues, his organs, and it's affecting everything.
So you said something important. It's a genetic disease.
Yes.
Meaning both parents are involved, one parent's involved. Talk to us a little bit about the disease and the inheritance of the disease.
So in order for this specific type of MPS, there are multiple types. But for MPS I specifically, both parents are carriers. So we both passed on a genetic mutation to him, and we just happened to hit the genetic lottery and find a match that both carried this. Every person carries about 3 to 6 lethal genetic mutations. It's just finding that partner that also carries it and then potentially passes it on. Because we both carry it, there is a 50% chance that we would have a carrier child, which is our daughter, a 25% chance that we would have an affected child, which is our son, and then the 25% chance to have a completely unaffected child and non-carrier child.
Wow. I'm assuming your son was born and you didn't know he had MPS I.
Right.
Walk me through what led you to say, hey, something's not right, maybe we need to have testing, and then the moment that you find out what this disease actually is?
So we had noticed, some motor skill delays, definitely a speech delay.
Behind developmentally.
Developmentally all around, global developmental delay.
Obviously, we had our daughter first, which was crazy. So we had our daughter first, so there was things that kind of jumped out to us
that she had done earlier that he had not done.
Yes.
He was sick all of the time,
A lot.
Constant ear infections, sinus infections. We were at the pediatrician's office every week getting antibiotics, and they were just like, sometimes kids have weaker immune systems. Like he had his first surgery when he was 4 weeks old. He had a double hernia repair and inguinal hernia repair. And they said, that's normal, specifically in children, sometimes in boys. So everything that we had pointed out to them was explained somehow.
And then the development side, they said, oh, he's a boy.
He's a second child. You baby him. Right. They take longer to develop.
So it's not that they pushed everything off. They kind of had an answer for everything. Like, hey, he's a boy. He's this is that. And
it wasn't until around the age of 2 that we went to the pediatrician and they said, okay, he is developmentally delayed. His speech is delayed. The shape and size of his head, has anyone ever said anything to you about his head? It's big. So they sent us to Duke to see neurosurgery in July of 2019. And they took an x-ray. They said, nope, he just has a big head. My brother had a big head. So we thought, okay, well, genetically, that runs in our family.
Big heads run in the family.
Yeah, it wasn't like he was born with a super small head and it got really big over time. It has always been big. He was 9 pounds, 8 ounces, which in hindsight is also related. But it wasn't until February of 2020 that we brought him to Wake County Public Schools to be evaluated for special education pre-K. And we had already at that point had a genetics appointment scheduled. We had scheduled that back in November of 2019 after his doctor was like, he's sick all the time. We have this lingering concern of his head. They said it was fine, but just things are not right. Maybe he has some sort of processing disorder. We think that it would benefit you to find out before he goes into kindergarten if there is something with his learning that would benefit you to know. So we had scheduled an appointment with UNC Genetics back in November of 2019. They could not get us in until May of 2020. But the doctor assured me we do not think it's anything that needs to be rushed. We don't think it's anything super scary and important. We just think it would benefit you to know before he goes into the school system. Okay.
I brought him to the evaluation, and it was pretty hectic.
Yeah. to the
She couldn't
to
go.
the
She was
evaluation with
working.
Wake County Public Schools. I almost canceled that appointment because I am very much a control freak. I want to be the one to take him to appointments.
Right.
He took him. They called me.
There were 7, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy. You name the therapist. They were in the room just watching
which is standard for a special education evaluation.
Okay.
But someone first time going into that, it's, as a dad, like, she's very well, like, she's the type that she looks up like everything about it, and then I'm the type that I just walk in.
He just shows up with evaluation.
I had 7 people just like, holy cow, just that were here to watch your kid, and I was like, okay, like, let's
a little
do this.
intimidating, right?
It was. It really, really was. And then I don't want to say, I don't know how it went, and then they called her after.
So they knew that we had a genetics appointment scheduled. Like they knew his medical history. They knew all of that.
Like 5 months in advance.
So he showed up to that evaluation. One of the therapists called me a few days later and was like, hey, we know you have genetics scheduled for May of 2020, currently February of 2020. We think you need to move this appointment to as soon as possible. And I'm at work in a full-time position that I just started with my job, recently promoted, sitting in my office, about to go meet clients for a walkthrough of their venue. And I'm like, okay, like, what did you see in the 2 hours you spent with him that his pediatrician has not seen in the 100 appointments we've been to in the last 2 years? And they didn't really want to tell me because they're not physicians. I can respect that. They didn't want to tell me all of these scary things
that they had to report, and then they pushed everything up.
So some of the things that they had said were, we noticed that his fingers are curled. We noticed that he has an abnormal head size and shape.
Limited mobility, like he can lift his arms up.
Limited range of motion. He has coarse facial features. And I'm like, okay, well, when I get on Google and I Google genetic testing in toddlers, it's giving me 100 different things. Like, I don't have time to sit and Google all of these things. If you're telling me that it's like urgent, I need to know what you think you saw. And they thought that they saw Hunter syndrome, which is MPS 2, and that only affects boys. They said something in the Hunter syndrome or the Hurler syndrome family. And I'm like, okay, I've literally never heard of any of those things. So I got on WebMD, I got on Google and did exactly what they told me I shouldn't. And I'm like checking off every single one of these characteristics, every single one of these symptoms he has.
It was like spot.
It's starting to make sense.
Yeah.
Oh man, it was like
noisy breathing, abnormal head shape, constant sickness, umbilical hernia, inguinal hernia, large birth
everything
weight.
was, the boxes were just checking after one another.
And I'm like, okay. And then I read life expectancy 10 years old. And I'm like, okay, well, he's 3. He's going to be 3 at this point. And I'm like, okay, well, like, what the heck? What am I supposed to do now? So I called UNC Genetics. I'm like, listen, my appointment's in May. I can't wait till then. I've already been on Google. I've already diagnosed my kid. Like, I went on Google Images and typed in Hunter syndrome, and my kid looks like all of these other kids. Like, clearly, like, I've already diagnosed him in my head.
Yeah.
Like some of them look like brothers and sisters.
Yeah, like
it's
he
crazy.
looks like he could be related to all of these children. And, like I said, my brother had a large head, but he never really looked like Chad. He never really looked like me. Now it makes sense why. So they were great. UNC Genetics was great. They asked me some follow-up questions like, well, tell me his symptoms. Tell me what stood out to you on WebMD. Like, what characteristics does he have? And they got us in as soon as possible to at least do the diagnostic testing for it. The doctor was out of the country, but they said, if you can come, we can do the blood sample and the urine sample, which is what they need in order to diagnose. And as soon as we arrived, the genetic counselor was like, do you mind if I take a picture of him and send it to the doctor? And as soon as she said that, I knew that she knew that he had it. So we had followed through with the testing. We had an appointment on February 25th. I'll never forget that date because that's the date that he met with the doctor. And they had confirmation, at least from the urine test, that showed that he had elevated GAGs, which is that waste that he can't break down.
Right.
So they could tell us right off the bat, he definitely has MPS. We don't know which type.
There's 1 through 7. So they were like, he's in that family.
Yeah.
Right.
Once we get the blood test back, it'll confirm. But they looked in his eyes. He has corneal clouding, which is a symptom of MPS 1 specifically. So the doctor was like, I would be willing to bet that it was MPS 1. So of course I come in with my notebook full of questions like, okay, like what is next? Like, what do we do from here? Because typically children are diagnosed within the first 2 years of life. If their state tests for it through newborn screening, they're diagnosed at birth, which North Carolina did not test at the time. They actually did a screening pilot that ended a week and a half before his birthday. So had he been born a week and a half earlier, we would have known at birth. He would have been able to be treated by 3 months old. And newborn screening saves lives. Like, there's no cure for this disease, but earlier detection leads to earlier treatments, which leads to better outcomes, because now he has 3 years of irreversible damage that we can't undo because it took so long to get a diagnosis. That is why we are such advocates of this.
You see that what we've both been through the last full 4 years of our lives.
No parents should get this diagnosis, but no parents should have to wait 3 years to get this diagnosis.
Correct. I was just going to say, Chad, I want to come to you for a second, right? Being a father of a son, it hits differently.
It's funny you say that.
Right. It hits differently. So that moment for you, and, you know, I promise I'm not trying to stir emotions, but I'm kind of emotional hearing this, thinking about it from both of your perspectives. What was that moment like that the diagnosis is confirmed and then all the millions of information that's out there that you can read, right? Like there's a ton of what if scenarios. For the past couple of weeks, you know, I've been familiarizing myself with MPS 1 just because of our relationship, right? Like, what was that moment like for you?
So it's funny, you think like the dad in it is always like the tough one, that got to get it done. We're going to get through this. Polar opposite. Like I was the grieving one. And maybe, I don't want to say if it was my daughter, it'd be different, it'd probably still be the same. But it's like, what was going through my head was like, that's your son. That's the person that's going to carry on your family name.
Right.
And I grieved like hard, like real hard. Like, and she went right to the grindstone. Was like, all right, we're going to do this. This is what we're going to do.
Like, I need to learn as much as I can. I need to equip myself. Yeah.
Yeah. And it turned hard at that moment because I was grieving and she wasn't.
I wouldn't say I wasn't.
No, you were, but
I had to compartmentalize because I wouldn't allow myself to get to that point because I knew, like, I just viewed his life as like an hourglass at this point. Like, we've wasted 3 years now. Like, it's like, you know, before Christ, after death. Like, I look at pictures and I'm like, before diagnosis, after diagnosis. Like, we didn't know then, but it's something he was born with. Like, he had it then and we didn't know. Like, we were treating ear infections when we should have been treating a terminal illness. Like,
but then it's like, I went into grieving. It took a while for me to really just soak it in and realize, like, holy cow, like, I went through the why us, like, why is it us? This is, you know, why my son? Why this kid?
Yeah.
You know, he's such a good kid. Like, why, you know, the whys. I went through just an emotional roller coaster of whys. And then I had her, like, I kept asking these whys and, you know, there were answers to them, but it's like, I like almost couldn't accept it.
Right.
Like, I couldn't accept the fact that I had to wake up with this kid every day and know that may be the last hug that I may get from my boy. Like, it probably took me a good 2 years. I mean, a good year or two. Both 2 years is the longest to like really, probably over the last 12 to 14 months is the time frame that I really, like, I don't want to say it, but accepted. Like, accept our path, accept what we have to do in our lives to really get where we need to go.
Yeah.
But also the support for our daughter, because like we can't forget her in this whole fact. Like, you know, she needed us. She needed dad to be supportive. And sometimes I wasn't very supportive enough. And it's not, I was just feeling my own emotions.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know how to channel my emotions through trying to explain it positively to, well, at that point, 8-9-year-old, I don't know how to explain it. And then, you know, sometimes like dads hide their, like, I can't tell you the number of times I freaking cried on my way to work. I cried in my car. I just freaking pulled it together. And just like, all right, because I was still working. Like, she immediately at that point.
Well,
like,
he was diagnosed March of 2020. So like COVID happened a week later.
All of changing of life happened. And then not just of that, life in the world was changing, but our own inner worlds were changing.
He could not come to doctor's appointments with me. Yeah. Like when we signed
one parent.
When we signed consent forms for transplant, like he couldn't be there. He had to sign and be on a FaceTime video.
So it's almost like, I was grieving, but I almost couldn't accept it because I couldn't be there. So I almost I felt like if I was there more, I probably would have been able to establish like a feeling better but I missed out on all of that. She was the one that had to go because I get it. Like, she's the
mama bear.
Yeah. Like, I get it. So it was like, we made that decision, but it really took me a long time to really establish a feeling of acceptedness and how I really should feel and attack what we have going with us.
Yeah. That's amazing. So mama bear, all the information that's out there. You're seeing 10 years life expectancy, but then you got to go through the treatments and diagnosis, right? Walk me through that. And then ultimately the decisions that you made with Jacob.
So when we were seen at UNC, they had told us because of his age, because he was 3 and most children are diagnosed either within their first 2 years of life or through newborn screening, that his brain, for lack of better terms, could be too far gone to go through a bone marrow transplant, because the two treatment options for this are either weekly infusions of a man-made version of the enzyme that he would need once a week for the rest of his life, or a bone marrow transplant. And the main difference between the two is that the infusion that he would get does not cross the blood-brain barrier. So eventually his brain would degrade over time. And, obviously we want to protect his brain. So we did seek a second opinion through Duke for a bone marrow transplant. And once we went through all of the pre-transplant testing, which, looked at every part of his body, his heart, his lungs, his brain, all of that, they eventually said, he's delayed, but he's not any more delayed than the average 3-year-old. So we decided to move forward with a bone marrow transplant, which at the time, they tested our daughter to see if she would be a potential bone marrow match. But we found out in that process that she is also a carrier of this disease. So they would not use her bone marrow. But they ended up finding a match of cord blood, donated umbilical cord blood. Duke has their own cord blood bank. So they ended up finding a match for him through that. So he had 8 days of chemo. They put a central line in his chest, which is how he would get all of his medicine, how he would get the transplant. And everyone hears transplant and thinks it's like this big climactic experience or procedure, and it's really just like a blood transfusion. They delivered these magic cells that were donated, stem cells from an umbilical cord blood. He had, like I said, 8 days of chemo to hollow out his bone marrow, get rid of all of his cells, and then they infused these stem cells into him, which we were in the hospital for 68 days, but it took him 18 days for his body to what they call engraft, which is take over the donor cells. And the way that that's different from the other treatment option is this will cross the blood-brain barrier. So he's making enough of the enzyme now from the donated cells that it will protect his brain. And, it's not a cure for the disease because he still has 3 years of irreversible damage, but it will slow down the progression of his disease.
And are you seeing that?
Yeah. I mean, we didn't think he'd ever be potty trained. He's potty trained now. We didn't know if he would ever be able to read.
Just started writing.
Yeah, he just started writing. He just started reading. It's not at the rate of the other kindergartners that he's around, but it's happening, and we didn't know if that would ever even happen for him. So, those are like the small victories that we celebrate. Like, to somebody else, he wrote his name. Yeah, I'm sure it's exciting, but he wrote his name. We didn't know. Right. We didn't know if he'd ever use the toilet. That is huge for us. And that is because of the transplant, I believe. And I mean, one thing that I know for a fact the transplant helped with is pre-transplant testing. He had a sedated hearing test, which showed that he had a moderate to severe hearing loss in both ears, requiring hearing aids. We got him hearing aids. Post-transplant, his follow-up shows he has normal hearing in both ears.
They said get rid of the hearing aids.
Yeah. So he does not currently wear hearing aids. And I believe that that's a God thing. But I also believe that, science and now that he's making this enzyme.
Science research matters.
No, that makes my heart smile. Little guy's going to be something special. He already is.
Right.
He's going to go.
And like I say all the time, because I've had people say what if this doesn't help him? What if a cure is not found in his lifetime? Or what if you're putting in all of his advocacy and it's not going to help him? It might not help him, but he's a part of it. His purpose. He still has purpose. His life still means something, even if it's helping the future babies.
That's awesome. Let's talk about Jacob now. So what's that journey been like for the last 4 years?
So since transplant, he had some complications during transplant, but he did great with it, all things considered. We overcame all of those. He has had multiple surgeries since then. He's had bilateral carpal tunnel repair. He's had decompression and fusion of his cervical spine. He's had bilateral hip reconstruction and plates put in his knees. He's continuously followed.
Before, after, for 6 months, 6 to 8 months.
We were doing home infusions.
He had a G-tube in his belly at the same time. So he had literally 2 things that are ported in his body for 6 to 8 months post-transplant.
But he is the happiest. He is inspiring.
That's awesome.
He takes everything with stride. And that's why it's so important for us, because it's all relative, right?
Yep.
When your kid gets strep, if that's the biggest thing happening in your life, that's going to feel terrible to you. Your kid is sick. You want to do everything you can to make them better. And before all of this, our issues were so small.
Right.
Whereas now we've had to shift and think how lucky we are.
Correct.
Because I personally know other families who went through transplant with us that didn't bring their kids home.
Mm-hmm. And we were told that risk from the beginning. They're like, listen, this is a risk, but
it's a risk we took to not even be able to save his life.
It's like relative to people in life. Like, it's not like sitting at a poker table or anything in life. Like, anyone watching and take a relative risk of what you think you took in life and then put it in our shoes and bring it in your children's life. And like, hey,
that's not downplaying other people's problems. Though.
No,
like
just bring it relative to the decisions that we all make in lives. Like, it was probably ultimately one of the hardest decisions like we ever had to make in life.
Yeah. And so you talked about essentially saying your outlook on life is drastically different now.
Yes.
Moments matter. I'm not saying moments never matter.
Right.
But the appreciation for minutes of the day have to be different for you now. Yeah. Right? Talk to me a little bit about just your outlook on life and how that's changed.
So I definitely am a silver lining type of person. I've had to retrain my brain to think that way.
Whereas I'm a very momental person.
If I don't, like, I am very high anxiety. Like, I carry a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. Yeah. And people like tell us all the time, like, you're so strong. And it's like, I'm not strong because I want to be strong. Like, I wish I didn't have to be strong, like all of the time. But I don't have another choice. Like, if you have a child and you were in my shoes, you would be doing the exact same thing. I'm not special. Like, we are not any different than anybody else. Like, we were dealt a not great hand, but we have to be able to take that and turn it into something positive. And, you know, like I said, we've advocated. I've met virtually, because everything is virtual now, but with North Carolina legislators. And, you know, we've gotten newborn screening passed for the state of North Carolina. As of February of last year, any baby born in the state of North Carolina is tested for MPS 1 at birth.
That's freaking awesome.
Yeah. So, and I mean, that was not solely because of me. You know, the MPS Society exists and they're out of Durham, oddly enough. They happen to be super close to home for us. Okay. So very involved with them and all of the work and research and everything that they do. But
now, piggybacking on what you said before about the grieving dad, there was a turning point for me, like where she's very stressful, high anxiety. She gets through it. She was tough at the beginning. It's like almost shifted. Like, I'm the more momental person. I'm like, she is there and we have so much fun, but I'm now kind of like, I'm not going to miss out on things. Like, I'm in the restaurant world. That's obviously how I met. Right. You know, and there was actually even sacrifices that I made during his diagnosis and while they were in the hospital. Like, I missed out on fundraisers and things, and it was sad, but it was the sacrifice that we had to make to get where we needed to go. I mean, right now, obviously, we're doing this podcast in the middle of my restaurant's dining room, and it's awesome. And we're blessed to feel like we're here right now. But there was definitely a turning point for me, mindset-wise, where I just clicked.
Had to prioritize the time that we do have with her.
Yeah. I mean, I can probably think about it. It was like the very end of 2022. So you're talking almost 2 years. Like, I don't know what it was. There was just a moment in my head that I flipped the switch.
Flipped it. Right.
But I also have brought in that to my work life, just my personal life. Like, I tell people this, and people that know me and work for me and everyone knows me, like, I always say Jacob's diagnosis has been a cheat code to life for me, because it really taught me how to just be in the moment. We all have accolades we want to chase. We all have goals and dreams, and I did. Like, we all do. Everyone had every single thing that they wanted to reach for something, and you know, you want to reach those stars. And I kind of had to set that aside, and just the momental feelings that people have in life, goals and jobs and careers and sports. Like, for me, that was all I had. And now I kind of reshifted my mindset. I've told people I don't care what it is. Like, I'm not going to miss out on a moment with my kids anymore. Like, it doesn't mean sports or a job or anything. Nothing will come in between having that momental moment, because as she has reiterated many times, that moment may never happen again. Right. I tell people, the best thing that I do every day is I wake up in the morning, we hear this kid going, "Dada, mama, hit me on my room."
And going back to the perspective shift, he has some behavioral issues, and he has some things.
But what I wanted to say was the best thing every day is I start our day by being able to hug this kid, and I actually wake up every morning just knowing that's what I want, because nothing else matters. Right. My restaurant, my job, sports that I play, I'm big into golf. Nothing matters besides getting that hug from both of our kids, obviously, but the one, you know, Jacob especially, because that's what we're talking about. But, and then it actually like carries to the rest of my day. Nothing else can matter. Somebody could give me the worst news ever. And I literally look at them and I go, it's okay.
Right.
Because let me help you through that, because we have been through that raw emotion of people telling us like, it's okay. I feel like we have like a gift to give to people.
Yeah.
They can look at us and I will find the positivity in anything now just because of what we went through in life so far.
No, I love that. And then you were talking about the behavioral issues, right?
I was just going to say like a shift in perspective. Like some of the things that take place aren't pleasant all of the time. And we still have to be able to discipline, just like we discipline our daughter. Like it's no different. But at the same time, it's like, oh, that really bothered me. But at the same time, there are parents wishing that their kids would stand on the table and dump Cheerios out. And they're not awarded that. They don't have that. So it's, we have to be able to make that shift. And this diagnosis is definitely going to make our daughter a more compassionate, inclusive adult because she's exposed to so much more, which has its positives and its negatives. I mean, not that she's had to grow up quicker, but she's seen and heard a lot of traumatic and real life things. And we don't keep that from her. Like nobody knows how long anybody has. And it's not something we think about on the daily basis.
Right.
But it's always there. I mean, it's something we think about. Like we take into consideration when we're making decisions and things like that. But we also have a really great community, like within the MPS community. Like I'm connected with a bunch of other moms. We vacation together. We are each other's support system because nobody truly gets it.
Every year.
There's a conference every year. So nobody really knows what it's like unless you're in it, you know?
So let's talk about some of the advocacy for MPS 1. And you said, Chad, there's 7. So not just MPS 1, but MPS 1 through 7, I'm assuming?
There's multiple types and ML, which falls under. It's the National MPS Society, but they support and advocate for all types of MPS and ML.
Okay.
Which MPS stands for mucopolysaccharidosis, which is just a really long scientific name. And then ML is mucolipidosis.
And I can't say either of those two, so I'm going to say MPS.
As I told him from the beginning,
MPS.
I told him the acronym, and I said my wife can perfectly explain the full name every single time.
There we go. So how can people join and fight the cause? Because number one, I need to commend you for fighting, even though you say it wasn't you that got North Carolina legislature to approve it, but someone had to start.
Yeah.
Someone had to be the carrier of the voice. And I will say that you were that megaphone. So number one, kudos to you for that.
Thank you.
But what are things that people can be doing to help support this? Because just like a lot of other diseases where there's researching, that all takes money. That all takes awareness. What can we do to support this?
So things that anybody can do, you can join Be the Match as a bone marrow donor because somebody out there, or, you know, if you're pregnant or you know somebody who's pregnant, you can donate your umbilical cord blood because that's just going to be used as medical waste. And because some selfless mother out there decided to donate her child's umbilical cord, our child gets a second chance at life, which literally costs you no money. You can sign up, like I said, Be the Match to be on the bone marrow registry. The chances that you'll ever be called to be a donor is very, very slim, but you could. And you could change somebody's life. You know, you can donate to either the National MPS Society or the Kennedy Ladd Foundation. Those are both two nonprofit organizations that fund research. You can follow us on Facebook.
Jacob's Journey.
Yeah, it's Jacob's Journey with MPS 1.
We do multiple fundraisers.
It's more posting updates on how he's doing and a glimpse into our life and the things that he goes through on a daily basis.
But you put a lot of fundraisers together as well.
We do multiple fundraisers a year, whether it's a t-shirt drive or we just did one for a custom pair of shoes. But
Parks Are Customs, by the way.
There you go. There you go.
But really, you know, just raising awareness to us is so important. Like this opportunity for us to reach however many more people that we wouldn't heard of before, because even the awareness portion of it, whether it reaches a high school student who knows they want to go into science and research, but they don't know what they want to do. Maybe this is a possibility. This is an outlet for them. Maybe somebody is going to see this podcast who has a child with all of these symptoms that Jacob had, and they don't know it. Like I personally know people who have been diagnosed because somebody approached them in a mall and said, your child looks like somebody that I know who has this disease. Like that literally changed.
She's called me multiple times.
The whole course of their life. Like, and you know,
I just look at the significance too. Like we're sitting here on Mick's podcast and this gentleman just happened to walk into my restaurant one night and to eat dinner. And we just got to conversating about life and he had podcasts and I brought it up to you. And I was like, let's do it. You know what I mean? I just feel like all walks of life, we all take it for granted all the time.
Well, and like you said, going back to like research. Like ultimately funding is what's holding our child back from having a future.
Yeah.
Like this is considered an orphan disease. Pharmaceutical companies aren't researching treatments for diseases that aren't going to make them money because this does not apply to the masses. There are not thousands and thousands and millions of people who have this. So they're not going to make money off of this, which as disgusting and sad as that is, that's the truth.
That's the life we
So
live, and we have to walk it.
So we have to be the advocates. We have to be the people to raise the money, to fund the research, because it affects us. And we didn't, for the first 3 years of his life, we didn't know. Like we were just normal people who had normal kids and lived a normal life. And one day that all changed for us. And that could happen to anybody.
It totally can. And for anyone that's listening or that's watching, this is why donation matters. And this is why simple things like donating and build, right?
Yeah.
All this matters because without this, the life expectancy is 10 years old.
That's outdated information. It is longer than that. And that's
with no medical treatment.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah.
And
With no medical treatment. Yeah.
And that's the scary thing. When you get on, like that information stops your heart. Like that's like
how many families out there in the world get diagnosed with this that can't go through medical treatment and they just literally have to watch their kid just wash away.
And that's what I mean. So we all have kids, have nieces, have nephews, have cousins, whatever it is. Life is so precious. And if there's anything that you can do, please do it because all of this matters. The most precious thing that we have is life. And the second most precious thing that we have is time. Donating for research and for funding can allow both of those things to happen. And so from my heart to both yours, number one, I appreciate you taking the time to be here.
We appreciate it.
But if there's anything that you want the listeners or viewers to end with, if there's one last message that you want them to have, what would that be? I'll let you start.
Hug your kids. Every moment with them is precious, whether they have any diagnosis. And, teach your kids about inclusion. Teach them to not stare, to ask, to say hi, to engage with other kids. That's my biggest fear because he is going to continue to be different. Like this is a degenerative and progressive disease. And I just want him to be happy.
There you go.
Like happiness is what matters.
That's right.
I mean, I'll piggyback on that. I mean, hug your loved ones, your kids, like those moments, they may not ever be there. So
and not everybody has the means to donate. And I totally understand that. And even those who have supported us and donated, like donor burnout is real. Like we are constantly asking for people to donate. And a share of this podcast, a share of a Facebook post. Like I said, we had never heard of this.
Yeah.
Just talking about it. That's helping us. That's helping future families. That's helping future babies. All of that matters. And it doesn't need to be this $1 million donation.
Yeah. But if 2 million people all gave $1, what does that do? And that's what I want people to understand. And in the links in the description, you're going to see a lot of ways that you can donate. Just choose something, I promise. And it doesn't matter if it's $1. It doesn't matter if it's $5. Like something goes a long way. And so for me, that's my one ask, is that everyone donate in your own way, in your special way, because there are a lot of Jacobs and there are a lot of mothers and fathers of Jacobs that truly would appreciate it. Would you agree?
100%.
For all the listeners and viewers, remember, your because is your superpower. Go unleash it.
Thanks for listening to Mick Unplugged. We hope this episode helps you take the next step toward the extraordinary and launches a revolution in your life. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast. And be sure to check us out on YouTube at Mick Unplugged. Remember, stay empowered, stay inspired, and stay unplugged.